No price talk and no Lambos. This is not another crypto podcast. Welcome to Ignition. I'm your host, Jillian, and each week we will be looking at the problems solved by blockchain. I'll be going deep with the people building the apps and communities which are changing the world around us. And welcome to EOS Dublin's Ignition podcast with me, Jillian Gotzel. Although we've just been talking with my first guest, and I said I was going to call myself Jill. Oh no, I've broken my first rule. Anyway, my guest today is Douglas Horn, who is the founder of Telos and also Good Block. So welcome to the show, Douglas.
Thank you, Jill.
And actually, that pause was actually accidental. I went, Doug. Oh no, it's Douglas. So I wasn't. Oh dear Lord,
it doesn't really matter. People ask me which one I feel more like, and I've always felt more like a Douglas than a Doug. I don't know why. Maybe
That's
I just
okay.
feel like an extra syllable for credibility.
Yeah,
this might end up being one of the parts that you cut out. I don't know.
It might be.
or sadly, it may be the most interesting part of it.
No, I think it's all going to be good. So I'm going to ask you the very tough question first of all, actually, because I really want to talk about the Telos. Well, Telos, by the way, I love the fact this is your English major coming out. Telos, it's the purpose of something. So the Telos of an acorn is to become an oak. That is so clever. So Telos, where does it tell us? Does that Tellus or Telos? Where does it Telos come from?
Well, you pretty much nailed it. Yeah. So, and I would love to claim that, but actually it was Aristotle. So,
okay. And his poetics. Yeah, and you know all about his poetics.
I'm not sure which one it was written in. I think, but
it could be Greek, could it?
The same quote is that, the description of what the telos of something is that the telos of an acorn is to become an oak tree. And so we thought that when we were launching Telos, it was coming out of a place where we really loved EOCO and the promise of it, and there was some concern there that some parts of it are, all these months later, seeming to probably been well founded. That the initial implementation might not really become what we kind of hoped it to be, and so we wanted something that would, right? And for me, that meant that people needed to have all the parts of the system in place and working in order for it to really evolve into what it wanted to be. And that kind of comes from my ideas around iteration being the route to improvement and not trying to start with something perfect. And that EOS was really hampered in its ability to iterate because it didn't have ratify amend or worker proposals or any of the other things. And then it also came from the idea that people needed to be more involved and have a vote that was meaningful. So we thought by adding those two things, we could make it a little bit more along the lines of what I personally always kind of envisioned EOCO to be.
Okay. So I think we should also address the elephant in the room that there was an article was put out that said you originally planned to become a block producer, didn't make the top 21. And the term was, which we were discussing, was you were a disgruntled block producer and hence you turned to fork a sister chain.
But yeah, and so
address that comment.
Well, I think that there's an echo chamber where once something is said, it just gets repeated until it's accepted as true. If anything, I'm entirely gruntled. I don't know where
we're loving that word. You're a gruntled man.
I'm gruntled. I'm very gruntled. Yeah, I'm as gruntled as I've ever been. I think we chatted briefly about how I was one of my majors was English, and you are an English minor, so we have that in common.
Yeah.
So that love of words.
That's brilliant. Oh no. So that's kind of the jokey. Yeah. No, so I mean, let's be a bit serious about it here. Now, people work.
Okay. I like a mix. I like a mix of levity and seriousness, but it is a serious subject. I'm not disgruntled. To unpack that a little bit, and if that person were here, I would say, well, I understand why you think that, but the reality is a little bit more subtle, and that is that a lot of people, when I shared my ideas for what became the Telos white paper, there were a lot of people at a lot of levels of the block producer community who agreed with it and were, have actually stayed sort of behind the scenes, very interested in the concept. And yet they, for various reasons, all of them good, I'm sure, decided not to join us at that point. And one set of those reasons were that if you were in the top 21 or in the hunt for the top 21 at that time, there was really no benefit for you at that point to come out and say, "Oh yeah, we're going with Telos," like, because there was a huge risk, and everyone was trying to get in the position to be a top 21 blog producer. And coming out publicly for Telos was just going to kill that, right? I mean, we were unknown, untested. It was a point where we hadn't been working on it for months and being fully transparent. I mean, we look at it now, and you see that. Looking back at it, you see, okay, wow, these guys have actually worked on this for months. They've been entirely transparent. They've built a lot of code that is really useful and seems to work. And they haven't come out and sold any coins or anything. It's been like a 2013 old school, grassroots project. At this point, looking back, I'm not hearing any kind of credible things about Telos being a scam anymore. But when we first came out, that was not the case. And I think people who were in the hunt were very wise to stay away for a while. And that's basically what they told me. Other people told me basically the same lines, that the other school of thought was that it was too early to sort of give up on EOS, and it was better to focus efforts there. And even though those people would be watching carefully, they were going to stay focused. It wasn't purely a, hey, we're scared of the backlash, but more like, we're going to concentrate all our efforts into making sure EOS is everything it can become. Those were the two main schools of thought. There was a very, very small group of people who said, you guys are crazy to do this. But if you think about it, it's like, just logically, why would the reason why it started out as a group of people who weren't top 21 or even really close to top 21 is that it would be, major self-inflicted wound to join us if you were in that group. And so that didn't happen, but it wasn't really a knock on Telos. And, to the credit of the person who wrote that was, first of all, it's really great to write about people. It's much better copy as a writer to write about somebody who's disgruntled and upset than it does to say, someone has minor differences, just in minor differences.
Yes, someone's not too happy about that, maybe.
Right. Yeah. Somebody thinks that it could be improved. Oh no, so that's just a writer thing. And I was a professional writer for many years, so I understand that. I had to knock out the best copy I could. And sometimes had words changed by editors to make it a little bit more.
Well, I hate that. Dramatic. I hate when an editor changes, especially the opening. Oh my goodness! And I'm like, I wrote a really nice piece there. I liked those people, and all of a sudden it's like,
anyone who writes has had that experience, right?
So,
So, and also it was back in that time. I mean, thank goodness that person wrote it. I was very excited, except for the word disgruntled. I was extremely, I was entirely gruntled with that article, because it was nice to have somebody write about that, at a pretty big outlet at that time. And he didn't have the benefit of what we have now of looking back and saying, oh, okay, look what's happened. I think that the articles that come out around our launch are going to have a different narrative, would be my guess.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I only met EOS a couple of months ago, actually, and I've been jumped in the deep end, loving it ever since. What was very funny is that someone was saying to me about was it about EOS or some time ago with all the voting? It's a bit like Game of Thrones in there. There's always
and winter's coming. Winter's here.
Winter's here, yeah. So some of the things that you're doing, which is quite interesting, because like when the EOS mainnet was launched, there was a lot of things that hadn't been thought through, as you said at the very start of this conversation. But you're also looking at other things too as well. Like, I mean, I love the fact that you're capping the amount with the airdrop, and that you're also saying that block producers, they have to rotate, and the standbys have to make sure that they're possible. So elaborate on some of the ways about the voting and the block producers and the spread of wealth with the block producers and the community.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you asked that. That's a lot of questions, but
I'm sorry altogether. Yeah, sorry.
Excuse me if I ramble. No, it gives me an excuse to ramble because I'm probably going to do that anyway. So around the economics, we looked, and the DPoS obviously is based on delegated proof of stake, and people vote based on their token holdings. And of course, EOS, Block One sold tokens and people bought them, and there was no way that EOS itself can ever change that, right? It will be if it's to become economically decentralized, it will be a sort of slow change over a lot of time. It's possible though it'll become more economically centralized. It's not guaranteed it'll become less centralized. We just don't know. But it's a massive amount of centralization where I mean, if you really look at it, 100 accounts probably have more than half of the token ownership. When we went and capped at 40,000, we only touched 1,098 accounts, right? So about 1,100 accounts, and that cut the token supply by 2/3, right? Mm-hmm. So the average EOS holder has 100 at Genesis had 101 EOS. So that's pretty far. That's a massive disparity from what some of the large token holders have. And people talk about Block One having 10% of the ownership, and there being a constitutional rule, which people don't seem to be paying much attention to the Constitution, but there's a constitutional rule that no one can have more than 10% of the ownership. And there's another account that has more than Block One. So it's once what we see just in general economics in the world is once economic centralization rears its ugly head, it's very hard to change tack. And so because Telos took no money from anyone and owed no money to anyone, and it was really just a group of grassroots block producers and other enthusiasts of EOCO getting together and creating something and building a network of value and then giving it away, we thought, well, we can give it away in any way we want. And my thinking was, we already have a group of people who are really sold literally on EOCO, so much so they bought some, right? They believe in the dream. We want to reward that. How can we touch that in the minimal possible way, but make it something that can actually work and isn't, because the number one problem was that massive centralization. And the cost of centralization really is not just that a few whales can control the network. The real cost, actually, I think, at least as big, is that those small people are disenfranchised, right? And anytime you see in real world or in crypto or in any group, anytime you see disenfranchisement, you are losing people. And I believe very much in the potential of people. I think when I look at North Korea and Syria and many other places in the world where people's potential is just lost to all of humanity, I'm very sad. And it's because I'm selfishly sad, because I feel like you never know, whether there's another Mozart or Gandhi or Einstein or something among those populations that's only kept down, right? Wow. And I think the same thing could be true in, to a smaller extent in EOCO, right? Who is that contributor? Who are those people who are going to come together, if only given the chance, and make this thing what it needs to be? Because there's no chance any of these things are going to be what they ultimately tend to become on launch, right? I mean, it comes back to, why is it Telos? And the main thing I wanted to underscore with that is that it's not about what you're launching with. It's about an ongoing process of becoming, of iteration, of expanding.
And you said that at the very start. Actually, that's a very good point. Iteration is key to your philosophy, isn't it? It's not just, it's there, ba-bam. You're looking at refining it the whole time. That is core to what you're saying.
And I believe that's core to the creative process. I mean, everything I've learned as, in the past as a writer or a novelist or an inventor of games or a filmmaker or any other crazy things that I've worked on in my lifetime, it has shown me that it's a rewrite. The best writing is rewriting. The best of anything is the next version that you make. And so I believe that is absolutely true. And that's why what I really wanted to do is create something that had all the pieces it needed to be able to grow. And so I guess that goes to the second part, not really about the rotating block producers and stuff, which is some sort of boring but important security stuff.
I think it's nice. I think it's nice.
Yeah, I think it's super important, frankly. And I would love to, but let me just jump over that for a second and say, I think the more important thing actually is that in Telos, you have an at launch, and we've waited to launch, and we are waiting to launch until we have this, because we all feel it's so important. You have the ability to change and evolve built right in. And if you don't have that, right, then you're like the Galapagos tortoise that, has to be, 50 years old to start breeding and evolves very slowly. I don't know if that's true, by the way.
I haven't followed my natural history is not so hot, I'm afraid.
Yeah. I don't know. There's some full disclosure. There are some species that are very slow to evolve, and because of that, and they don't do well. We are mostly all things you see on the earth today are mostly the products of things that were able to evolve fairly quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so much so that, I mean, humans have taken over the world because not only do we evolve genetically, but we evolve culturally, and then we evolve through technology. And we are just doing all these things to expand how deeply and broadly and quickly we can change ourselves to become better. So we have, and that's basically our secret to, the whether you view humans as the massive success story or basically a cancer to the planet. Either way, it's based on our ability to evolve.
So can I ask a question then? So you're holding off the launch until you can actually incorporate the ability to evolve in Telos. So what does that entail? What does that mean?
Right. So, and we're very close to this, actually. So what that entails, in my view, are a couple things. Number one is the ability to ratify and then amend our governance, which means that the governance documents that we have, we can make changes to based on the community's direction.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And then the second thing is worker proposals, the worker proposal system. And what this is there is an amount of money that is an inflation generally created. In EOS, it's 4% that's set aside. In Telos, it's 1.5% per year. But what that goes into a fund, and there was always supposed to be a way for people to make proposals and vote on those proposals. And in EOS, they just didn't do that, and they're kind of stuck, right? So there is some contention around the EOS constitution. And then to get rid of that contention, they need to have a ratification process or amendment process. But that functionality was never built. And so they have to figure out, how to do it. And they're working on it. And some people are working very hard on it. But because it wasn't there at launch, it's hard for them to really agree. Is this what we meant? Is this exactly what, So they have to kind of get agreement around agreement. And then once they have that, then they can get to a point where they can vote on how they will implement a work proposal system. And by the way, when I say they, I mean we, because I was an early participant in that project too, and I have more EOS now than I had when it launched. So I
believe it.
Yeah.
So, question for you then: do you think that the way that you're working out, as I say, with your amendable constitution, with the voting, with worker proposals, do you think that the changes that if you figure these things out, do you think that the EOS mainnet could retrofit them?
I think that's I've said, and this sounds self-aggrandizing, and I apologize for that. I personally believe that the best thing to happen to EOS and its best chance to change is through Telos, because the providing of an example of how things could be different is very powerful, right? Especially if you see that, there's that people are adopting and accepting those changes. So I personally believe, and this all kind of came out of me being a bit of a huge game theory wonk. So I kind of sadly predicted kind of what was likely to, the current state. What I thought was happening, and the reason we launched this project is I kind of thought that we would get to about where we are. So believe it or not, that's kind of how I came to this point. So I think the next step then, one possible future, is that Telos launches, provides a really good example of what could be on EOS, and then people start, risk arbitraging from EOS to Telos, right? Because you'll be able to buy a lot of Telos for a few EOS at first. And if they actually do the same thing, but Telos does it in some ways better, then the smart money is to, divest some EOS and place that in Telos, right? Because you can just get a much bigger chunk of the network. So I actually think that obviously there would be economic impacts of that on the token price. And I actually think that economic impact is probably the one thing that can actually drive some of the bigger whales who have not shown themselves to be, always acting in the interest of the network, but much more driven by personal interest. I think that's the thing that can drive them to say, oh, okay, people don't like this. We need to back off and adopt some of these changes. And I think until that group does, you won't get the changes because it's voting based, and they can
voting for Christmas. Turkish voting for Christmas. So we could end up with Telos. We could look at maybe more the Waltons as opposed to Game of Thrones. Or similar. Maybe that's too old.
I don't know.
I used to love the Waltons.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know which television series would best reflect the.
I don't know. That just popped into my head. I have no idea why. I spent a lot of my time talking to people who want to make the world a better place. I'm going, yeah, that was like the Waltons. I think that was when that was. So
that would be good. We're not really. I don't think we're naive. I think we're almost anti-naive about things, but I don't know.
And then tell me, so you mentioned the launch date. You're almost there. When do you think that's going to happen?
Well, we're recording this on Monday, December
the 3rd. Yeah, it should be going out very soon.
All right, it will go out in the next couple of weeks. Then we will have launched. Then we're
wow, so soon.
The next couple of weeks, yeah. But if you're talking 14 days, then we will have voted to launch by then. Absolutely.
Excellent. So you're going to vote in 2018. You're going to launch, in 2018.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Excellent.
For sure. My main question is, are we going to vote on it? I mean, we're going to vote tomorrow on Tuesday, the 4th, but whether we vote to launch there, we are looking very closely at the tests we're running, and there's certain tests that have to come up 100% for at least 24 hours. And so I'm watching our StageNet and TestNet all the time and seeing when we have to replace some code. That we're down to that level now.
Okay.
So once it's out, it will be launched.
Okay. And what would you say to the EOS community? What would be your takeaway line for them to do? Call to action, perhaps?
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm part of the EOS community. I think we're all part
of course, yeah. No, I beg your pardon. Sorry. I didn't imply you're outside. You're inside. You're inside.
Sigmund Freud had a concept called the narcissism of small ideas, which was if you are in a group that is essentially extremely similar in their beliefs, as we all are, based just believing in crypto, and then even further drilling down to believing in EOCO, then you have extremely similar beliefs. And the closer your broad base of beliefs are, the more vehemently you fight for the tiny differences between you.
Right? That's interesting. Yes, that makes sense.
As Henry Kissinger said, there's the reason that academic arguments are so fierce is that there's so little at stake, right?
I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah. So I think that the EOS community and the Telos community are, if drawn as a Venn diagram, would simply be a circle, right? They're completely overlapping. We are the same community. Everyone who had EOS at launch will have Telos automatically, whether they want it or not. And people who don't can easily get in there and get it. We're going to be on several exchanges. So I would say, embrace it. This is very likely that Telos could be the EOS that, you kind of thought you were going to get. I would take a look.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you so much for your time. That's fascinating. I'm glad we addressed the elephant in the room up front. I'm so glad you're so gruntled. I'm so gruntled too.
Good.
It's a new word I'm going to use all the time, much to my children's chagrin. I'm gruntled today. Thank you so much.
Gruntled?
Okay, let's go. So we've been chatting with Douglas Horn, who is the founder of the sister chain Telos and of the Telos Foundation. So thank you so much indeed for your time today, Douglas.
Thank you, Jillian. It's been lovely talking to you.
Brilliant.